This is the Freeheel Life Podcast, episode number 36. I'm your host, Josh Madsen, coming at you from the Freeheel Life Shop in Salt Lake City, Utah. And it's another week, another day, another dollar, I guess. And I'm rolling solo today. We're going to be doing another mailbag episode. You guys have been sending in some amazing questions, and I thought, why not? This is a good way to knock them out so my fingers don't get tired from typing too many emails back to you. So hopefully you're listening for the answers, and I'll try to shoot you emails back regardless, let you know I was talking about your questions on here. Today I'm going to skip over newsroom and notes. Not much to go over there as per usual lately, but I do have some awesome guests coming up, and I'm psyched about that. Digging a little into the well of Telemark history. We're going to start talking about equipment again with Taylor Johnson, shop manager at Freeheel Life. We're going to dig into some gear reviews with Craig Dostey, stuff we should all be looking for in the upcoming season, and I can't wait for those. And also got some great people from some different companies, and hopefully dig into there and see if they have any new stuff cooking on their end. And I can't wait to do those. So it's really keeping me psyched to talk to all these people and kind of dig into the well of people I've met over the years. And just a quick note on that note, one of the coolest things that happened to me this week, and I just thought it really reminded me how awesome our Telemark community is and how widespread it is I received a package from some friends of mine that I've only met via Instagram, but became aware of years ago, and they are some of my Telemark friends from Russia. And I remember the first time that I heard there was kind of a little crew in Russia, and I don't even remember. It had to be Instagram or Facebook or something like that. But I just remember thinking how awesome that was, that Telemark had reached, these places that maybe that doesn't seem far off to maybe somebody in Europe or something like that. But growing up here in the States, I thought, man, that's really cool. And then to be able to, communicate with people back and forth, and they had a sweet Telemark Russia patch. And for anyone who knows me, I've got a sweet vest that I love patches, and I like to put all my patches on my vest. And that vest will be a great spot for my Telemark Russia patch, along with patches from France and the Black Shoes and Telemark Ski Ontario in Canada. So if you're listening out there and you guys have patches, let me know, because I like to put patches on that jacket or pins, anything to kind of commemorate and show support for my Telemark brothers and sisters around the world. So today, like I said, we're going to do, I think this is the fourth mailbag episode, and we're going to kind of dig into some questions people have sent in. A lot of times I say we, like I'm here with somebody else, but it's actually me. I get similar questions from people, and this is a good way to kind of tackle it. Some of the questions may not require like an entire episode. There's a few of those, and I've been setting them aside. So I'm always down for topic suggestions, people suggestions. You guys are the boots on the ground, so to speak. So I love hearing what's going on in your area. So the first question comes from Trey. Looks like Trey's out of Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I've been through there many times with my band and friends, and I don't think I ever showed a Telemark movie in Coeur d'Alene, but I did show them in Sandpoint at the Canada Theater. If any of you guys are up there, that's the Schweitzer ski resort area, 49 degrees north. There's a good little tele contingent up there. So if you're listening, I know you guys are up there because those shows used to be pretty awesome. And used to go to old Eichhardt's in Sandpoint. Good spot. So Trey from Coeur d'Alene, he says, I got my first, or let's see. He says, I've got a couple questions for you as I look up to Freeheel life and all things Telemark. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. How does one go about finding a job in the skiing, specifically Telemark industry? I just graduated from Montana State University in Bozeman, Montana, with a degree in exercise science, and I would love to combine my passions of skiing with the human body. Do you happen to know of any positions within the ski or telemark industry that combines these two? Does a position even exist? If by chance you have any idea or maybe even a contact, your advice and guidance is greatly appreciated. Awesome question, Trey. I have heard this question often over the years, and it's kind of it's an interesting topic. And as far as let me start with Telemark specifically, and I'll kind of go general and then kind of answer your question more specifics with the exercise stuff. In Telemark in general, there's not a lot of jobs. And if you've listened to any of my podcasts, I'm definitely a fan of building business and small business, obviously, because we're not a huge group of people, but we are a strong group. And I really believe that there's opportunity to create more business, honestly. I've been able to do that here with Freeheel Life. And honestly, that is one of the kind of unexpected things that I have grown to love most about my Telemark shop, is the fact that I've been able to actually give work to other people. And I honestly, when I set out on this journey many years ago, that I guess I didn't ever realize that would be something that I would dig so much. There are obviously some companies out there that are Telemark specific, like 22 Designs, Bishop, you could say Volet. If you go back to my industry podcast, I talk a lot about these companies. I need to put a list of stuff together for you guys, and I know someone had emailed me about that. M Equipment, that's in Europe, so that's probably a little far away from you. Most of those, I would say, are like manufacturers. They're not necessarily going to be in the realm of what you do, but could you get a job there? Yes. Is it probably going to be full-time? No. Ski work in general is tricky, and that's across the board, snow sports industry as a whole. But it's a tricky industry to get into. I also think it is not an industry for everyone, at least from my experience, because there's kind of a life limit or a life. I'm trying to think what's the word for that. There's kind of a time frame that works really well for it. Kind of reminds me when I was talking to the guides in the last couple episodes, or a few episodes back. There's kind of a point where, you can get an administrative job, but being a guide may or may not be great for your financial objectives. So I would say anything in the ski industry in general, awesome experience. Coming out of high school or college, great time to do it. And yes, there are some jobs that will go far beyond that. It just depends on what your personal objectives are. As far as the exercise component of that whole thing, Telemark, not as much. The only thing Telemark fitness wise I have seen over the years is some Telemark specific fitness videos that a gentleman made, and you might be able to find those online. I don't know if there might even be a downloadable version. I know we did something with him with Telemark Skier Magazine years ago, and I believe his name is Jeff, and his last name is escaping me right now. But I would love to see somebody do something like that. Is it lucrative enough for you to make a living on coming up with something like that? I don't know. Give it a shot. And I think, there's all sorts of opportunities if you want to get after it and stick to it long enough. And that's just been my experience in general with this. Is it's telemark and ski business. Telemark specifically, it's survival of the fittest, my brother. If you got a good idea and you want to stick with it long enough, the only way you're going to lose is if you quit. So, as far as like wider snow sports, I know living here in Salt Lake, the closest thing to us is like the Olympic Training Center. I know there's a lot of, I haven't been there myself, but I know there's like physical therapists and trainers and probably more people in that environment that you specialized in college and with your degree. And, there's definitely some opportunity in there, and that would probably get you closer to snow. Last thing I will say is a lot of times getting into ski related business is also complicated because you're passionate about that. And I'm all about I'm not someone who says, don't make your passion your business. That never made sense to me because I think you should be passionate about what you do. But do keep in mind, it's working in skiing. You got to be passionate about business as a creative thing too, just like, skiing, because a lot of times it takes away from actually being on the snow. So, it may work better to work outside of it and exercise so that you make enough dough that you can do some awesome heli backcountry ski vacations. So hopefully that kind of gives you a little insight into that. I'll shoot you an email too, and maybe we can find a time to get on the phone. But I know that question comes up often with young people, and hopefully that if you're listening out there and that's what you're thinking about, don't let anybody stop you, and take your youth and find a way to do it. All right, this next question comes from. This is my first challenge of pronunciation of the day. Kjartan. He says, what I'm wondering is, what is your advice related to changing bindings on a ski? When listening to your podcast, you want to buy the binding, and I'm wondering if you have to buy new skis as well. I'm on a 75 millimeter binding, but I'm considering new boots next season, and will definitely go NTN and Tech Toe. But do I have to buy new skis as well? This is a good question. And a lot of people, are in this transition, moving from 75 millimeter to NTN, just because that's where the technology is right now. And obviously, it's a pretty penny to drop on boots and bindings, which is that primary equipment change that you're going to have to make. So this is a really good question because people that come into the shop all the time, when they see the price tag of boots and bindings at retail, they're like, oh man, now I don't know if I can do this and get skis. What I would first do, step number one, is I'm going to walk you through this as if you just walked into our shop. We know that you're going to get the boots and bindings. You've already made that commitment to yourself. And you're like, I really don't have more money to spend on skis. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at how many mounts you have on your skis. And what we're going to assess there is basically like if the bindings that are currently your 75 millimeter bindings that are on your ski, that's the only mount that you've had on there, then it's a really kind of easy thing. As long as you're down to ski on that same ski with the new boots and bindings, which actually sometimes is a good thing because you're already changing 2 out of the 3 major components of your hardware. And I've seen people hate their new setup, and it's literally just because there's too much change at once. So But yeah, if you have a single mount on the ski, we're going to undo those bindings and we can remount with fresh holes the new bindings onto your skis. The question may come up. I know some of you are thinking this. If I've got a 22 Designs pattern on my 75 millimeter bindings, like I've got a pair of 22 Designs axles and I'm moving to the Outlaw X, can't I use the same holes? Here's the answer. If you come into a shop like ours for liability purposes, we're not going to use the same holes. If you're at home and you can unscrew your bindings and assess that, in fact, there's no water damage, there's no rotting, no stuff like that, you may choose to do that. I am not encouraging you to do that because I think a fresh mount is always better, especially if you've been skiing on it for a number of years. There's a good chance there's some wear and tear that it's just not worth taking the risk of a tear out later on. So we would do a fresh mount on there and put those bindings. The next part of that is we only need to move it back or forward of those holes about 1 centimeter from the center of the old hole to where we're going to drill the next hole. And that gives us plenty of space. So you just go back 1 from the old holes. So if you've got multiple mounts on there, you can start asking the question if the ski integrity has been compromised. I mean, if you're just trying to kind of get through it, and you can get, as long as you can get a good solid mount, the wood or the wood and the composites aren't rotted away or for some reason, I say go for it. And so you do not, the short answer is you don't need to get new skis as long as the skis are in good shape and you can get a fresh mount in there without having a compromised situation with the bindings pulling out or something. Don't use your old holes. Make fresh ones. It's only 1 centimeter difference. Not a big deal. Carton, I hope that helps, brother. That's a great question. All right, this next one is from Alistair. Says, hey, Josh, loving the podcast. Just finished all the Majo episodes. I have skied Rotofella free rides since they first came out. They, of course, are torsionally amazing. And I like the sound of Majo, but still concerned about their power for when you are really cranking hard in technical terrain. The tourability, I don't really care about. In my mind, I don't really mind the free rides going uphill. How would you compare the two? Do you have... Oh, and he's asking if I have it in stock, which we don't right now. But this is an easy one. You're skiing free ride. You're not worried about the tourability. And this is kind of part of a broader topic that comes up. And I often have this discussion with people because when Tecto first showed up, many people, including some of my good friends like Craig Dostie, he's like, he's our gear guru, and we would have this conversation. He would say, Madsen, Tecto's the future, man. And I would immediately tell him, I'm like, Tecto is not the future. So we've had this ongoing debate. I think what most of us have agreed on in the shop and in our inner circle of talking is Tecto is really the future of long distance mountain travel and touring. It doesn't necessarily have to, and it really isn't the future of Telemark per se. And the reason I say that is because if you're skiing inbounds, or you're only doing side country, or you're doing short tours, or you just really aren't doing huge days in the backcountry, a normal tow cage, we call it a lot of times call it a tow cage, just like a normal tow, like on an Outlaw X or, Bishop's, the BMF, any of those kinds of tows. it's good. It's fine. And you don't really need the tech toe. So in Alistair's case, when he's talking about Rotofill a free ride and you're not worried about the up, immediately I'm thinking one of these other options. And most people coming from a free ride are going to go to an Outlaw X. That's what we have seen in our shop for the last 4 years, and for sure we've seen a big decrease, like the free rides and the freedoms. Once you actually had real step in with the original Outlaw, and then the Outlaw X was even easier to step into, you're basically getting a souped up version of what the free ride was, and the tourability is better. So, Alistair, what I'm thinking for you, brother, is definitely a pair of Outlaw X is going to feel most at home with where you're at right now, based on what you're riding. Then you just need to decide if you've been riding Rotofill a free ride since the beginning. I mean, we're talking like 2009. So back then there was 5 different spring options in the Rotofill a free ride. There was white, which is super soft, green, which is still around, blue, which is still around, and then there's red and black springs. Those were in the beginning that do not exist anymore, but are super stiff. So what you need to do is really just kind of figure out where you're at on the spring configuration on your Rotofill free rides. And when you get on a pair of Outlaw X, you need to go standard spring or add stiffy spring, and then kind of go from there and adjust it, because there's a couple different settings. Good question. And that it's kind of cool to see people. NTN's been around long enough, and I always say this, NTN, there's a whole episode, if you haven't listened to it, it's like NTN versus 75 millimeter. The reality of it is NTN is just the platform we're working on now, and it's going to be the platform we're working on in the future. That's it. There's not really a debate or a discussion around it. It's kind of been a slow burn trying to switch into it. But if you're going to get new boots and bindings, that's the platform you want to be on, because there's more options. Then it's just a matter of switching into something that transitions you so your Telemark turn doesn't suffer, and you can get a pretty close flex. And that's what I was going to say at the start of that. Is awesome to see that now we're talking, you've been on a decade of NTN stuff, and you're already looking into the new binding on that platform. It's fun to see for someone like me. So I love that. Okay. Next question is from Dave. And Dave says, I like your concept. You're right. You can't grow the sport if people don't have access to rental or demo gear. 100% agree. The interest is out there, believe me. As a side note, many of my fellow patrollers tell me that telemark skiing is one damn inefficient way to get down the mountain. I'm not sure why they rush to stand in the lift line. My buddy, being a little more blunt, responds to the critics by saying, well, anyone can effing alpine, so what's your point? I know I swear most of the time on here, but I'm just going to... He kind of blurted out, so I'll do the same. I think it's funny, man. I just wanted to address this one more time. Again, talked about this before several times. The idea that Telemark is inefficient is just not... It's not the cup of tea I'm drinking, The way that I look at it, if you're looking at inefficiency, you're looking at something that's technically, quote, air quote, efficient versus inefficient. And these people are looking at Alpine as efficient, and they're looking at Telemark as inefficient because they think that you're lacking something being the heel piece. It's a silly argument, in my opinion, because they're completely two different turns. They're completely two different histories. And really, I try to keep everything within Telemark, and I'm sure most of us do. But when I hear the word inefficient, I already know where that conversation's going. It sounds like you probably have dealt with it like everyone else that I know. When I'm talking inefficiencies, like anything with Telemark that I talk about, is I like to think of inefficiencies within Telemark. So if a Telemark skier rolls up to me and he's like, "Hey man, your stance is really inefficient," there's two ways I look at that. I say, if let's say your stance is really low, like knee to ski, in 2020, I would say, technically speaking, and that's the operative word, technically speaking, yes, it's probably inefficient to be so low because you're going to smoke your legs faster. Now, I am a big believer in one other thing that always trumps technical. It's called style. If you want to, and that is the number one reason why I love Telemark skiing, hands down, always have, is you can do whatever the hell you want to. And if you want to be low, you want to be high, you want to be in the middle, do it. Because that's what makes it beautiful. And that's why I like watching all my Telemark friends, because all of them have completely different styles, and I can always pick them out on the mountain because their individuality bleeds through their turn. And I love that. And I think it's something that sets us apart from everyone else. And it's a craft, and you have to learn it, and you own it, man. So I don't know if yours was as much of a question as just a statement, but that's my response. I love it, man. I just love the individuality that goes along with Telemark. It means a lot, and to me, and I know that it hopefully means a lot to you guys out there too. Okay, this next one is from Jeff. I've answered a couple of Jeff's questions in the past. He's always got some really good ones. He just says, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on stiffer springs for 75 millimeter and NTN, like maybe advantages and disadvantages of stiffer springs. I may have covered this. Hopefully I'm not double answering this question, but this is a good one to know. I actually did a video of this, and it's not as easy to explain on a audio podcast as much as a video kind of helps. So check out the YouTube channel, Activity versus Stiffness. The first thing kind of relates back to what I was just talking about with the last question / statement. It's all about style, and that's really what your turn's going to come down to. And your style is going to translate into your equipment and making it work for you the way you want it to. That's the bottom line. There's not really a right or wrong answer in terms of should I have a stiff spring. The only time I can think about stiff springs being not really working in your advantage for most people, at least let me speak from my own experience. Stiffer springs I like when I'm charging super hard, really big turns, like almost like race style turns on a groomer, or big mountain stuff where I'm really trying to open it up wide and not a lot of quick turns. Because then I have everything. I like that stiffness of the spring with a stiffer boot, and I can drive a heavier ski, literally like heavier in weight, and fatter skis I tend to like a little bit stiffer boot and binding, just because I feel like when I'm not aggressive, that it's just, I don't like having something that collapses, in terms of spring or boot. Where I like softer, and especially the last couple of years, I've really been vibing on this. Softer spring settings, and this is what's great about NTN stuff, right? Like you can adjust on the mountain, and with most of these bindings, there's a ton of adjustability. If I'm skiing trees, moguls, snappier turns. I'm skiing a ski that's maybe a little, narrower underfoot, and I just really want to wiggle around stuff. That's like the number one word that comes to my mind when I think of like soft springs for me personally is, do I want to wiggle? And that's what it's like. Because like when I'm wiggling through stuff, softer springs let me switch my stance, switch from turn to turn faster. And I absolutely love that sensation. When I have stiff gear on and I got to move quick, it just seems very delayed. It kind of reminds me of, it's like for those of you who are old enough to remember driving in like an old 70s Pontiac or Cadillac or something, like grandma had the big boat, and it just, you're going around the corner and it just, you got to really work it, It's almost like, if you're old enough to remember, and this is dating me, if you've ever driven a car without power steering, that's what it's like. So it just takes a lot longer to get things around when you got a stiffer setup. And so that's kind of how I always operate. It's like if I'm going out to, spring day, I'm going to wiggle through the trees. I'm in the Midwest. I'm on the East Coast. It's tight. I like to keep those springs softer because I can switch those lead legs a lot faster and kind of get between stuff and react quick. So that's kind of how I look at springs, Jeff. And then a lot of it's just, like I said, trying out different stuff and trying different settings. I wouldn't say, a lot of it just is style and then what type of skiing. Middle, and also which binding you're coming from. That would be the last thing I'd say regarding springs and a lot of what we talk about in the shop. We always like to ask you if, hey, you're getting a new binding. Okay, number one question is what binding are you on? Because what we don't want to do is screw up your style, because that is going to be the number one hate generator, is getting new gear and you're like, this sucks. And you're going to come back in and you're going to be like, I hate these bindings. Well, hopefully that's not the case. And honestly, it doesn't happen too much with us here. And I'll be honest, the reason it doesn't is we ask a lot of questions what your current setup is. So, if you're coming from a G3 Targa to jump to another binding, especially that, because it's not active and you're probably not on the super stiff spring either. But especially the activity of the binding plays a lot into it. So go watch that video, activity versus stiffness. If you have more questions on that, hit us up at the shop and we'll walk you through it. And hopefully that helps. Okay, next question. I probably should have put these together because this was another one from Kjartan. And but this was a great question. I don't know if I've had this one yet, but this is one that is fairly frequent in the shop. And he says, I have a pair of Garmont Synergy boots with G-Fit liner that I got heat fitted when I bought them in a Telemark shop in Chamonix ages ago. And the question is, if it is possible to get them reheated and fitted again. Yes. Heat moldable liners you can reheat. What I would say is, in some cases, you may not want to expect that some of the density of the foam might be there. Like, for instance, what I'm trying to say is you got them heated and it expanded around, your foot. So let me go back. Some people might not even know what a heat moldable liner is. So let's have a little lesson here. In most modern Telemark boots, there is a foam liner that is in the boots. In Scarpa, they use an Intuition liner. Intuition is a brand, and all of the Scarpa Telemark boots use that Intuition liner. It's a heat moldable liner. If you're buying used Telemark boots, some don't have that heat moldable liner, so you need to ask somebody who knows if you don't know how to identify it. Scott Crispy, they use their own liners, but they are both heat moldable as well. And basically what we're talking about is in a ski shop like ours, we have a way to heat up those liners. Usually takes about 10 to 15 minutes to heat them up, and that makes the foam of the liner malleable. And then what we do in most cases is we put a little thing called a toe cap, which is we'll put a liner sock on and a toe cap. It's like literally like a cap that goes over your toe, and then another liner sock. And then you'll stand in these soft, malleable foam liners, and we put it inside the boot and buckle it up. As the foam cools, it forms and hardens around your foot. Hardens is kind of I don't know if that's the best word. That doesn't sound very comfortable, but it form fits to your foot, to the shape of your foot, and it's custom in that sense and makes it more comfortable. So if you have little weird bumps and things, it's a good way. It takes a huge portion of that fit process and just does it right there. Honestly, most people, they're good to go after that. There are people that do need custom boot fits, and that is an entirely new topic, but that's basically it. You're going to form fit it. So once it cools and it form fits to your foot, you're going to go ski it, and you can reheat. I've heard some people say you can heat them up to a half a dozen times. I'm not sure exactly the spec on that. I'd have to go kind of check into that. If you're skiing massive amounts of days every year, the problem is you're probably going to degrade some of the foam. And although you might be able to heat it up and kind of get it to form fit around, and that may be good for you, you might have compressed some of the foam out where it's not going to be like a brand new thing. So that is yes to your question, but also kind of take it with a grain of salt. So you're not expecting like a brand new liner is just going to, kind of pop back into place once you put it on the heater. But yeah, people do that. And we, like a lot of times people buy used boots from us out of our consignment area, and, we'll do a heat mold for them just to kind of, make it more comfortable and a little more custom. And if you have that option, it's great. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay, the next question is from our friend Jay. And he had a couple, there's actually two different questions here that I'm going to cover from his email. And the first one is quiver killer or inserts. Which ones are better and why? Do you use them? And he says, I use them in all my skis because I seem to wear out Outlaws once a year, and it allows me to put another pair on while I'm getting them rebuilt. This is a good question because a lot of times this question comes up the last 3 or 4 years as they become more popular. To make a clarification, I think what you're asking at the beginning is quiver killers or I see what you're saying. You're actually okay. Quiver Killer is a brand of what we call like a quiver killer insert. There's also a company called Binding Freedom. There's also M Equipment. One of our Telemark manufacturers actually makes inserts that can be put into the skis. So you may be referring to inserts as in like permanent, like T-bolt style inserts. I'm not totally sure if that's what you're asking, but I'll kind of go that direction. To give a little background to everyone out there, if you've ever heard of Binding Freedom or Quiver Killers, the idea behind these is it's a small metal piece with threading on the outside and like wood threading on the outside, and then it has machine threading on the inside and a closed bottom. Okay. And the closed bottom is very important, and I'll explain why in a second. So what the idea is, and Quiver Killer, that name is really good, because what it's saying is it's basically trying to help you alleviate having to have a quiver of skis with one set of bindings per ski. And it's allowing you to have these inserts put into the ski permanently, and then use machine screws to put the binding and fasten it to the ski. And the machine screw allows you to just unthread it and take the binding off and put it on a second pair of skis, or third or fourth. And that's the idea, is you're killing your quiver, and hopefully saving you money. So do we use them? Yes, we use these in the shop all the time. We've used them. The best application that we've used them for in our shop is in our demo and rental program, and especially in the mid-size skis. When you get into like that 170, 171 range, oftentimes we'll have people that have a small foot and they ski a 170, and we do all NTN. So let's take it back to that. We do NTN bindings on those skis, which is great for rental and demo because you have small and you have large. Okay. So, but oftentimes you might have someone who's shorter that uses a small boot, and sometimes you have someone who's shorter who uses a large boot in NTN. And so Quiver Killers allow us to do quick swaps like that. The one thing you need to watch out for, some companies like Volet, for instance, who is a big Telemark supporter, they do not warranty their skis if you put Quiver Killers in them. Okay. I don't know the whole theory behind that. I think they've had some bad warranty issues where Quiver Killers can pull out. I've seen it. We've had it happen rarely, and we've had a lot. I'd say the majority of times we don't have any issues with them. A lot of it has to do with knowing how to put them in properly, to be honest with you. And it's not, it's kind of an easy process if you're mechanically inclined. Sometimes it can be a little trickier than that. You basically need to know how to use epoxy, and there's a couple different tools and techniques that you're going to need to do to get them in properly. The biggest thing, honestly, is the initial mount needs to be spot on, because everything's got to be perfect. So if you don't have a jig, doing a paper jig gets a little tricky. So that's a service we offer in the shop, and actually has been pretty popular. So we use them for that. I'd say the other application that we have used them is if someone's using a TTS style binding from Olympus Mountain Gear. There is which is a Tecto binding, and then it has kind of a traditional heel throw. It's the original Tecto Telemark binding. Oftentimes we will offer inserts for where there's a plate that goes behind the toe, and you can adjust the pivot point. But in order to adjust that pivot point, you have to take the plate off. And so if you don't know where you like it, and you do the mount straight into the wood of the ski, and then you don't like it and you want to try something else, you got to like undo the plate and then remount into the same holes. And so going back to my whole idea, try not to use the same holes, type of thing. That's a unique situation where we often will offer that to a customer and say, hey, you have a TTS binding. Would you like to insert the middle plate so you can switch the pivot point without having to damage the holes in the wood? And the maybe third application that it gets used is if somebody has a bad, let's say they have a screw come loose, or maybe some water got in there, the rest of the mount is good. We always will use, first off, we're gonna assess it. If the mount is screwed up and there's water, maybe they brought in an old pair of skis and we didn't mount it, we've never even seen it, and everything's rotted out. We're fresh mount, no questions asked. We're gonna tell you to do the safest option, okay? And then we're gonna shift that mount. But every once in a while, you might have a screw come loose, or maybe that screw, somebody didn't use epoxy and they're using, maybe they didn't even use glue, or so, it wasn't sealed properly and got water in it and it comes out. There are times we will use quiver killer, and actually this year we use the M Equipment's inserts, so we could support our Telemark manufacturing friends over the other ones, and we would use those for some of these repairs, and I like those better 100% than helicoils. And if you know what a helicoil is, me personally, I feel like they're garbage, and they don't, for Telemark especially, because they don't really, what they do is not solve the problem and they end up pulling out a bigger hole. So if we have to fix a hole, a lot of times we'll do it with the quiver killer. So case by case basis, I'm generalizing here, but yeah, definitely some great uses for the quiver killer style inserts. But you can order them from M Equipment, and we have them in stock, so you can always get those from us too. But yeah, I like how you're doing that. It's a good way to swap bindings off while you're rebuilding another. His second question was kind of funny, so I thought I'd do it. The Tele ski style between North America and Europe is different. Which one is better? I'm all about different styles personally. There's no better style. I don't even know if there's, honestly, even within Europe, there's so many different styles too. I think maybe what some of the European style that we see is there's definitely more on-piste skiing, meaning on like a run, like a groomed run, a lot more carving. And I mean, there's actually quite a bit of free ride kind of stuff going on, and there's some excellent skiers. And I know we'll talk to some of those on the podcast, even here in the near future. But I love all different styles. I don't think one's better than the other. And yeah, I don't know. Individuality, that's the winning combo for me. So good questions, Jay. Thanks for shooting those over. Let's see. The next one is from Justin. And Justin says, love the podcast and the Stoke. I'm curious as to why Bishop Manufacturing is rarely mentioned. You talk about every other brand of binding and just wondering why not Bishop. Are they pricks? Does their gear... Oh man, that made me laugh. Okay. Are they pricks? Does their gear suck? None of my business? He's like, I'm a 22 Designs fan and not going to switch, but being in Colorado, I hear Bishop now and then. Thanks a lot, Justin. Awesome question. No, guys at Bishop are cool. I've mentioned them before on the podcast. They're, I guess, to answer question number one, are they pricks? No. Does their gear suck? No. None of your business. I don't know. No, but I think part of why I have mentioned them in the industry podcast, I mean, they're definitely worth mentioning. They've stepped into the ski realm too, started making skis. The bindings, they've got a phenomenal history of Telemark stuff. It's actually the original owner, Finn Doyle, who started it. I mean, that was back in the early 2000s, and now you've got Dave Bombard running it out of Summit County there in Colorado too. I probably don't talk about it as much here. Mostly we don't sell the bindings. We work on them. We don't see them as much in Utah either. I'm not as big of a fan personally of that big of a binding on the ski, and I'll explain why. When NTN came out with the free ride, then the Freedom, and now you're seeing like the Outlaw, Lynx, Majo. My thought is that the second heel connection meaning the part under the ball of your foot and the toe. I think that is how a Telemark bindings will look moving forward. There are exceptions like Bishop's BMF, BMFR, and you got what I just mentioned with the Olympus Mountain Gear TTS, Telemark Tech System. They use what we call the real heel, or your actual heel, with either a cable like the TTS or BMF, which stands for Badass Mother, and the touring version of it. I'm trying to keep this clean for you guys this round. We don't want that explicit podcast. No, but me personally, I like bindings that are smaller on the ski. It's sleeker, it's out of the way, there's less parts, and I me personally, I think that's the future of bindings. It keeps it more lightweight and compact. So, as far as those guys, I'm sure we'll talk about more about what they're doing and whatnot. So I'm sorry I haven't mentioned Bishop as much. I will make sure that I make a better mention. I probably need to put a list of, I'm always preaching to you guys to support all these companies. I probably have a list in front of me at all times. But good question though. And thanks for the talking point and the prompt. So I'm glad we could address that. I think that's gonna wrap it up for today, people. Awesome questions. Thank you for tuning in. And I can't wait for some of these upcoming podcasts with some more guests and more things coming up. I think it's this time of year I really start thinking about what's going to be coming up, with the upcoming winter. September seems kind of like that turning point, so we're only like about a month away. And that seems when people start thinking about ski season and snow, and it starts cooling off a little bit. I know I cannot wait for that because it is scorching here in Salt Lake. So, but if you guys want to support the podcast, as always, I always welcome that. You can always support by making a donation of your choice. PayPal.me/freeheellife. We always appreciate that. Every little bit helps us put these things together. Freeheellife.com for all your Telemark needs. We're going to be restocking little by little, updating the site, getting everything ready for the upcoming season in the Northern Hemisphere. And we would love to be your preferred Telemark shop. We have the most experienced staff of people. We are small, but we work hard to make sure we know what the hell we're talking about. And we want to be the people that can kind of help you get into your next setup, fix your gear, answer questions, whatever you need. We want to be here, be a resource center for you out there. You can always check out articles about the Telemark scene, all the awesome people that are out there, gear reviews, telemarksgear.com. Like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, the YouTube channel is a great place to check stuff out. And in the show notes, you can find all of our social media handles and links to cool stuff that we're doing there. And as always, like these questions, you can email me at podcast@freeheellife.com. I welcome everyone's questions, concerns, if there needs to be a correction, little prompts like I got today. I appreciate it. And just much love, everybody. Hang in out there. Be good to each other. Take care of one another. And until next week, spread Telemark always. Peace.